use a favorite term that all of you people really came up with. We will stop the steal.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the 20 darkest and most insane moments in U.S. presidential election history.
Russia had hacked the Democrats. Then it emerged that Russia was behind masses of fake news and adverts on social media.
Number 20, racism and the birther attack. The 2008 election was a pivotal moment for the United States, resulting in the election of the first black president. Ugliness around the election, though, punctured any fantasies of a potentially post-racial America. Obama's candidacy was met with racist and bigoted rhetoric. The election saw the rise of the birther movement. Ultra-conservative pundits peddled the conspiracy that Obama wasn't born in America and was actually a secret Muslim. His opponent, Senator John McCain, publicly rejected these conspiracies. Unfortunately, the narrative persisted throughout Obama's presidency, fueled by figures like Donald Trump. This climate of racial resentment and revanchism helped lay the groundwork for Trump's rise in 2016 and his transformative influence on the GOP.
Bottom line, every bit of this came from Donald Trump.
Number 19, the Great Depression scandal. When George McGovern won the 1972 Democratic primary, anti-war progressives felt ascendant. To balance out the ticket, McGovern chose Senator Thomas Eagleton, a moderate Catholic from Missouri, as his running mate.
It is thus with deep humility in the face of the responsibility you've asked me to assume, and with profound gratitude to you, the delegates, and of course to Senator McGovern, that I accept your nomination.
Eagleton's candidacy lasted less than 3 weeks. Soon after his selection, it was revealed that Eagleton had suffered from depression earlier in his life. He was treated by doctors with electroshock therapy. The media fell into a frenzy over concerns about his mental health and fitness for office.
But the senator's top staff men are deeply worried about the Eagleton affair. They are hearing privately from many old-line Democrats that Eagleton should be replaced. And a few of McGovern's most ardent supporters are saying it publicly.
In an era where mental health issues were highly stigmatized, the media treated the story as a scandal. McGovern ultimately asked Eagleton to withdraw, fearing the controversy would derail the campaign. He would go on to lose in a landslide anyway. Number 18, Ford sunk by a debate gaffe. Despite Watergate, the American public wasn't necessarily ready to hand the White House to Democrats in 1976.
He told college students in Miami he's for decriminalization of marijuana and promised an elderly crowd in Fort Myers he will have a top member of his White House staff who represents retired people.
The race between President Ford and challenger Jimmy Carter was very tight. Ford waged a surprisingly strong campaign but struggled to close the gap. His controversial pardon of Nixon enabled Carter's pitch as an outsider wanting to restore trust to resonate with the electorate. Still, Ford could have pulled it off until his chances were fatally dashed in their second debate. Ford made a huge gaffe, claiming erroneously that Eastern Europe was not under Soviet domination. This misstep reinforced concerns about Ford's foreign policy expertise. The gaffe helped propel Carter to a narrow victory. He won with just 50.1% of the popular vote.
If I can tap the greatness that's in you and in the American people, we can make our nation's government great and a source of pride once again.
Number 17, Daisy and a referendum on civil rights. The 1964 presidential election between Lyndon B. Johnson and Barry Goldwater was one marked by intense polarization, similar to what we see today.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
Goldwater, a staunch conservative, opposed the Civil Rights Act, which passed only 4 months before Election Day. Civil rights became a defining issue, as Johnson framed the election as a battle between progress and regression. Johnson hammered this home with a powerful ad campaign, portraying Goldwater as dangerous and extreme. The most infamous of these was the Daisy ad.
These are the stakes. To make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the dark. We must either love each other, or we must die.
It aired only once, but has been talked about for decades since. It implied that Goldwater's recklessness could lead to nuclear war. Though controversial, it underscored the election's stakes. Johnson won in a landslide, reflecting a clear rejection of Goldwater's hardline platform. Number 16. Swift boating and the birth of modern fake news. John Kerry first became a public figure in the early 1970s. He was one of the most vocal Vietnam War vets to speak out against the war. That led to a career in public service, culminating in his candidacy for president in 2004.
The Bush administration has run the most inept, reckless, arrogant, and ideological foreign policy in the modern history of our country, and we will reverse that course.
Unfortunately, a political group, the Swift Boat Veterans for Truth, launched an ad campaign to destroy him. The Swift Boat ads falsely accused Kerry of lying about his military service and painted him as a traitor. The attack completely undermined Kerry's history of service, one of his greatest strengths. The ad circulated widely on right-wing media and severely damaged Kerry's credibility with veterans and swing voters.
They're a front for the Bush campaign. And the fact that the president won't denounce what they're up to tells you everything that you need to know. He wants them to do his dirty work.
Despite being debunked by many sources, the campaign helped George W. Bush narrowly secure re-election. Number 15. Multiple assassination attempts. The 2024 presidential election has been one of heightened political tension and rhetoric.
Donald Trump took the stage in Butler, Pennsylvania just after 6 p.m. Within minutes, the campaign event erupted into chaos.
Polls have indicated that some members of the electorate are just fine with the use of violence to achieve political results. During 2024, there were 2 assassination attempts on the life of former President Donald Trump. The first shot at him with a long rifle, grazing Trump's ear. The other was caught after laying in wait on a golf course for a half a day. These attempts reflected the dark undercurrents of an increasingly divided nation, where extreme rhetoric and partisan hostility fuel violence.
58-year-old Ryan Wesley Ruth expected to enter a plea during his arraignment today. Ruth, who was originally arrested for gun violations, is now facing an attempted assassination charge after being indicted by a federal grand jury last week.
Number 14. 2 sex scandals and a wild inauguration. The election of 1828 was a rematch between President John Quincy Adams and Democratic rival Andrew Jackson. Their second election set a new low standard for mudslinging. Adams, the former ambassador to Russia, was accused of pimping a young woman out to the Tsar. Jackson's wife, Rachel, was accused of bigamy, having married Jackson before finalizing her divorce. The rhetoric was heated and increasingly nasty. Unfortunately, Rachel's heart gave out before Jackson could take office, dying right before Christmas. Jackson accused his detractors of her murder. When he was finally inaugurated, the party devolved into an angry mob. They were only and finally sated when lured away with liquor placed on the White House lawn. Number 13. Roosevelt's assassination attempt. After serving 2 terms as president, Teddy Roosevelt had a wild post-presidency. He went on a protracted African safari, a tour of Europe, and even flew in an early Wright brothers plane. When he returned to the States, he began to stir up trouble within his Republican Party.
By 1912, he already had 2 terms under his belt as president, but old TR wanted more.
Distressed by the power of both the Supreme Court and corporate oligarchs, he spread a progressive message. He eventually decided to run for a 3rd term under a new banner, the Progressive Party. In 1912, Roosevelt was at an event in Milwaukee preparing to give a speech. There, a disgruntled saloon keeper shot him from just a few feet away. Roosevelt then proceeded to give his entire lengthy speech with the bullet still lodged in his chest.
Roosevelt went on to speak for at least an hour, according to various accounts. He was eventually rushed to the hospital. There's no known photo of Roosevelt during the speech or right after the shooting.
Number 12. A generational candidate destroyed by monkey business. Gary Hart, senator from Colorado, was considered by many to be a brilliant, forward-thinking, once-in-a-generation political mind.
I intend to seek the presidency of the United States in 1988.
He preached modernizing American foreign policy and foresaw a future where non-state terrorists were the biggest threat to the U.S. Unfortunately, the country was denied his expertise thanks to a lurid sex scandal. Rumors about extramarital affairs swirled around him. He was livid when pressed by reporters, believing that the issues were more important than his personal life. He dared the media to dig up any evidence themselves. They did, in less than 72 hours. They published a photo of Hart with model Donna Rice aboard a yacht named Monkey Business. With his credibility shot, Hart had to drop out of the race.
I believe I would have been a successful candidate, and I know I could have been a very good president, particularly for these times. But apparently now we'll never know.
Number 11, running from prison. Eugene V. Debs ran for president in the 1920 election as the Socialist Party candidate. What made this, his fifth candidacy, extraordinary was that he campaigned from prison. Debs had long been a fierce advocate for workers' rights, socialism, and pacifism. By 1920, he was serving a 10-year sentence under the Espionage Act for his outspoken opposition to the U.S. involvement in World War I. He'd fought the conviction all the way to the Supreme Court and lost in 1919. Despite his imprisonment, his message resonated with a significant portion of the electorate. His slogan, "From Atlanta prison to the White House," symbolized his defiance. Debs earned over 900,000 votes, around 3.4%. President Harding commuted Debs' sentence a year later. Number 10, eating dogs and cats. The second presidential debate of 2024 saw Donald Trump contend with the new Democratic candidate, Vice President Kamala Harris. During the debate, Trump falsely claimed that Haitian migrants were, quote, eating dogs and cats in Springfield, Ohio. The statement sparked outrage and disbelief across the country. His campaign, led by running mate J.D. Vance, doubled and tripled down on this lie in the weeks that followed.
If I have to,
But it wasn't just a meme,
create stories so that the American media actually pays attention to the suffering of the American people, then that's what I'm going to do, Dana.
The disinformation campaign had real consequences, fueling anti-immigrant hatred and causing fear and division across the country. Haitian migrants faced increased threats and harassment. Established Springfield residents, too, had to deal with bomb threats and lockdowns at local schools and hospitals.
The mayor says he believes that the threats are directly connected to the baseless claims that Haitian migrants were abducting pets in Springfield in order to eat them.
Officials, including the town's Republican mayor and the state's Republican governor, begged the candidates to stop. Number 9, a candidate's death. The 1872 presidential election was one of the most bizarre in U.S. history. Incumbent President Ulysses S. Grant ran against Horace Greeley, a newspaper editor and founder of the New York Tribune. Greeley had earned the nomination of both the Liberal Republican and Democratic parties. The mudslinging was at a fever pitch, and Greeley's running mate, Gratz Brown, was often drunk during his public appearances. Greeley's wife died weeks before the election. When he lost, the failed candidate was soon ousted from his position at the Tribune and fell into a horrific depression. Just weeks after Election Day, Greeley died in a sanitarium before the Electoral College could cast its votes. They were ultimately divided up against several other candidates. Number 8, a terror campaign against poll workers. After his loss in 2020, Donald Trump pushed the big lie, claiming that the election had been stolen. That call to arms endangered poll and election workers across the nation.
Do you think we could see a shift in how elections are run at the state level and how election workers interact with the public after everything that happened following the 2020 election?
Notably, poll workers Shay Moss and her mother, Ruby Freeman, faced intense scrutiny and abuse after being falsely accused of manipulating votes in Georgia. The personal threats got so bad that they were forced into hiding. This intimidation has created an environment where election workers fear for their safety. More alarmingly, the MAGA wing of the Republican Party has been strategically placing election deniers in key state and local positions. Seemingly poised to undermine the electoral process, these deniers are preparing to gum up the works in 2024, hoping to force the election to the House of Representatives.
It makes me angry that we have elected officials who seem to want to just suck up to the former president as opposed to following the law, that they'd rather disenfranchise voters than allow their voices to be heard.
Number 7, a racist and rigged election. The election of 1876 was one of the most racist and disputed elections in American history.
There was still violence in the South, which had existed since the Civil War.
Republican Rutherford B. Hayes faced Democrat Samuel J. Tilden in a contest tainted by allegations of voter fraud and intimidation. As Reconstruction came to an end, white supremacists like the Ku Klux Klan sought to annihilate black voting rights. Widespread use of violence, murder, and terrorism drastically suppressed the black vote. Redemption campaigns among white Democrats sought to manipulate vote tallies and restore white Democratic control. In the face of resurgent white power, Rutherford B. Hayes engaged in a controversial compromise. He became president in exchange for withdrawing federal troops from the South. This decision effectively abandoned black citizens, leading to decades of Jim Crow laws and systemic racism.
The Republicans get the White House. The Democrats effectively regain control of the American South. No more federal protection of the rights of recently freed African Americans.
Number 6. SCOTUS picks a president. The 2000 presidential contest between George W. Bush and Al Gore came down to a razor-thin margin in Florida. A recount was initiated due to disputed ballots.
And I got on the phone with Bill Daley, and he said, "What's up, Mike?" And I said, "Billy, we haven't lost. This thing's going to be an automatic recanvass." I said, "This thing's too close to call."
Frantically trying to beat constitutionally mandated deadlines, the campaigns fought in court. The case quickly reached the Supreme Court, culminating in the monumental Bush v. Gore decision. On December 12th, the court ruled 5-4 to halt the Florida recount, citing dubious equal protection concerns. This decision effectively awarded Florida's electoral votes to Bush. He won the presidency despite losing the nationwide popular vote. For his part, seeking to ameliorate tensions, Gore quickly conceded.
The court declared that the recounts violated the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause because there was no uniform standard for counting all ballots.
Still, the ruling was incredibly controversial. To this day, legal experts question the validity of the decision, bemoaning judicial influence in electoral politics. Number 5. Tumultuous primaries. 1968 was one of the most transformative years in modern history. Protests against the Vietnam War erupted after the Tet Offensive ramped up operations. Prague Spring challenged Soviet control in Czechoslovakia. Martin Luther King Jr. was killed.
Good evening. Dr. Martin Luther King, the apostle of nonviolence in the civil rights movement, has been shot to death in Memphis, Tennessee.
Amid this turmoil, the Democratic primary became a chaotic spectacle. Senator Robert F. Kennedy entered the race, inspiring hope for change. Incumbent Lyndon B. Johnson dropped out. Then, Kennedy was assassinated shortly after winning the California primary.
He turned to the right toward the kitchen.
When he did come through, lots of television cameras and stuff, and we were going into a press conference.
He was shaking hands with the two busboys, talking with them, and it was at that time that the shots started.
Following his death, the political landscape shifted dramatically. Hubert Humphrey, the established candidate, gained traction despite not winning any primary elections. The Democratic National Convention in Chicago became the site of massive, angry demonstrations. Anti-war protests erupted outside and were violently put down by the police. Number 4, Russian interference. Russia engaged in a multi-pronged assault on American democracy during the 2016 presidential election.
As the presidential campaign continues in the fall of 2016, American intelligence officials brief members of Congress that the Russian government is looking to interfere in the election.
According to U.S. intelligence, their aim was to increase division, encourage mistrust of the democratic process, and to hurt Hillary Clinton's campaign while benefiting Trump's. Russia's military intelligence hacked and leaked thousands of Clinton's emails. The Mueller report concluded that while there was insufficient evidence to establish collusion, there were numerous contacts between individuals linked to Russia and Trump campaign staff who were aware of Russia's efforts. Several misled or lied to investigators about these contacts. Additionally, the Cambridge Analytica scandal revealed how data analytics were used to micro-target voters.
They used this micro-targeting to maximum effect, enticing voters onto the Trump train with a social media blitzkrieg of memes, videos, and messages.
Russia reportedly manipulated social media algorithms to sow discord and spread disinformation, amplifying divisive narratives. Number 3. The corrupt bargain. The four-way race in the election of 1824 all but guaranteed none could win the presidency outright. John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson, William H. Crawford, and Speaker of the House Henry Clay fought for domination. Andrew Jackson won the popular vote and secured the most electoral votes, but did not achieve a majority.
He didn't get enough electoral votes to be elected. In fact, nobody did. And so under the Constitution, when that happens, it goes into the House of Representatives.
The election was ultimately decided in the House of Representatives. Henry Clay chose to endorse Adams, whipping the votes in Adams' favor. After Adams was inaugurated, he appointed Clay his Secretary of State. Jackson called the deal a corrupt bargain.
And Jackson just went, to use a modern term, ballistic. And he vowed that this was not going to happen again.
This backroom deal enraged Jackson's supporters and set the stage for a bitter rematch 4 years later. Number 2. Stand back and stand by. Trump's instructions to the Proud Boys during a 2020 presidential debate became a rallying cry for extremist groups.
Would you like me to condemn
white supremacists and right
Proud Boys? Stand back and stand by.
Following his loss, Trump attempted to interfere with state election outcomes by pressuring officials to overturn results. They refused. He lobbied the Department of Justice to support his unfounded claims of widespread fraud. They too refused. So Trump asked his supporters to attend a rally on January 6th. When the day arrived, he urged them to march on the Capitol and, quote, fight like hell.
And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol.
This rhetoric galvanized a violent mob, including far-right militias, that breached the Capitol, aiming to disrupt the certification of the Electoral College results. 5 people died, and 4 officers took their own lives in the months that followed. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into Settings and switch on your notifications. Number 1. The election couldn't prevent civil war. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 established the territories of Kansas and Nebraska and allowed the territories to decide for themselves whether to permit slavery.
Pierce signed into law the Kansas-Nebraska Act, allowing voters in the Kansas and Nebraska territories to decide whether to allow slavery within their borders, negating the earlier Missouri Compromise.
Instead of easing tensions as intended, this legislation ignited violent conflicts and laid the groundwork for the Civil War. The subsequent debates between Abraham Lincoln and Stephen A. Douglas established Lincoln's national prominence. He eloquently articulated the moral and political implications of slavery, appealing to a growing abolitionist sentiment. Though he lost his Senate race, his newfound popularity earned him the Republican nomination for president. He ran as a moderate, aiming to contain slavery rather than abolishing it outright.
Fellow citizens of the United States, in your hands, my dissatisfied fellow countrymen, and not in mine, is the momentous issue of civil war.
The South still saw him as a threat to the peculiar institution. War broke out mere months after Lincoln took office. Those who ignore the past are destined to repeat it. Do you know of contentious moments from past elections that can teach us how to be more excellent to one another? Let us know in the comments below.
And then Seward looked at the ending of the draft, and it says, "It's your choice, my friends in the South. Will it be peace or a sword?"
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.